Welcome to Let's Talk About Emotions. I'm Anshin Texter. I'm a licensed DEI trainer and consultant. And we have here Bobby McIntyre, also a licensed DEI trainer and consultant, and Pia Alt, licensed DEI trainer and consultant. Pia and Bobby both work with horses as well. So it's nuance to their work that actually we should talk about in a different video because that's pretty cool. Today we're going to talk about grief and what it means and how to work with it and how to honor it, the gifts that it brings us. We're just going to talk and explore and see what happens. And what's interesting is both Bobby and Pia have an interest in talking about grief and experiences with it. And I'd really love to hear what came forward for you when you're thinking about talking about grief.
So I can start. For me, the grief that I'm experiencing right now and what's coming up for me has been the loss of everything we know that's normal right now, right? So it kind of threw me back to 9/11 for a brief second where I remember people going, things will never, ever be the same in the world after this. And yet so far, so many years after, it does seem like we have, of course, haven't forgotten, but things have come back to sort of a normal. Yeah, I mean, of course, when you're flying and traveling and things like that, there's a sense of extra security. But I mean, we're not thinking about terrorism like we did in with 9/11. And this is the same thing. We are in the midst of complete chaos, of super afraid of what is going to happen to me. Is something's going to happen to my family? And so I'm grieving that our normal way of living has been taken away from us, in a sense,
Absolutely.
and we've no control over it.
Yeah.
And yet I also am a little afraid that at some point we're going to forget and we're going to become complacent again. And so maybe I'm grieving sort of ahead of its time, but it's not a sadness. It's more just acknowledging, wow, this is going to be much, much different from now on.
A loss.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about the gifts of grief briefly, just kind of introduce grief from a DEI perspective. Would either of you like to talk?
Well, yeah, the gifts of grief are transformation and going deeply into something that you love and opening your heart in a way that is not opened in any other circumstance, so that you become more able to be more compassionate, more forgiving, more able to see the big picture than you ever could before. That's what I always think of when I think of grief.
Yeah, you put that really beautifully. Remembrance as well, kind of an honoring of what you've lost, and deep release are a couple of other gifts of grief. It's really about acknowledging that you have lost something irretrievable, right? You had no control over it. You have no control over getting it back. It is truly gone.
Right.
And yeah, I think Pia, you're so right. We're in this place where the way of life that we knew is no longer possible.
No, if the circumstances don't change in terms of being able to treat the disease, it is really life-changing, and in ways we can't even anticipate yet. So it's very difficult. It's not just grief, there's anxiety, but the anxiety is open-ended, because since anxiety helps you prepare for the future and you have no idea what the future is going to bring, there's grief and anxiety, which makes it even more difficult.
Totally. Yeah. Especially since, you don't know. And then I've been bringing in apathy and depression because you don't know. And how can you prepare for a future that you don't know and you don't have any control over? So it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hang out over here for a while and not look at it anymore.
I
Stay
think
home, bury
that's
your
what's so
face in
powerful.
books.
Sorry, go ahead,
Oh, go
Bobby.
ahead. I was just
Oh, just when you said apathy, definitely apathy has gone hand in hand with a lot of the emotions that I've been feeling. And it is that ability to just finally say, you know what, I can't do anything about it anyway right now. So why react? Why get all, upset, anxious, sad, angry? Um, and it's definitely put me in the apathy corner, definitely. And I'm kind of hanging around with that for a while because I want to feel what I don't want to be a victim to the hopelessness and the helplessness. So the longer I can sit with apathy and not really have to care, it helps me process a lot of the things that are going on.
Yeah, it gives you some kind of mental space. Yeah, I agree. I feel that way with confusion. Although honestly for me, apathy is far more comfortable because I feel like I'm controlling the situation by stepping back.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so that's a gift of apathy too that I hadn't even thought about.
Oh yeah, yeah. It gives you this kind of illusion of control. Well, I can't control anything out there, but I can control my reaction to it by not reacting or by just like not caring for a while or distancing myself or distracting myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I'd like,
found that I did that a lot, and have done that a lot ever since my cancer diagnosis, which was also a life-changing thing. And I'm just now coming to grips with it. It's been 2 years, and I'm coming to grips with um, the fact that my life has changed in a way I can't go back. I can't go back. I
yeah.
don't have the physical strength. I don't have the stamina. I have some limitations of movement, and I've lost a lot of flexibility and a lot of physical things, and all of that contributed to a whole lot of grief, which is what drew me to this conversation, because I've been grieving now for 2 years, but I didn't realize it was grief because it was grief and apathy and anger and grief and confusion and grief, and it was just back and forth, but it's the way I was processing it. So that's another point I wanted to bring out, is that grief has its own timeline. And my sister likes to say, grieve it for 3 days, then move on. But you can't control grief like that. Grief does what grief needs to do, and it takes however long it takes.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what's so beautiful about it, is that you're not under any pressure to have to deal with something. And nobody, even if people are telling you, oh, just get over it, or, how long do you really need? It doesn't matter, because in your own body, in your own psyche, what you have to go through. And I think it comes, it peaks and then goes down, right? And then it peaks. And that's what I love about it, is it comes unexpectedly and then brings you something, and then it goes away for a while and you're handling it, and then a little bit comes back again. But it's that never the same kind of roller coaster, and not anticipating what's around the corner, that I love about grief. And the time it takes, like you said, does there's no recipe to how you process grief or how long it takes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it brings you the energy to transform your life, because you're going to have to transform it, because there's been an irretrievable loss. And so your life is going to have to change, because you've built your life around one reality, and the reality is now different. And so the energy of grief gives you the strength and the release and the rejuvenation from that release to transform your life in a way that will work in the new reality.
Mhm.
I love what you're saying here, and it's so true. It's almost like I'm imagining one world before this event happens, and then it's a new world. It might some things might look the same, but it's like rearranged. So things are fundamentally different, whether, yeah, you've experienced cancer or whether your entire world is experiencing a pandemic.
Right.
Things are just going to be different. Something that just came up for me was resistance to grief. I am a resistant crier. I will admit that right now. It has been a long process to welcome my sadness, welcome my grief when it comes up, and it's definitely I'm still in process with it. What's your experience with resisting grief? Or, I mean, I don't think I want to broaden it to existing your emotions, because that's a whole nother topic too. But resisting your grief, and do you experience that too?
I definitely do. I haven't cried about my whole cancer diagnosis. The grief that that's why I didn't think it was grief until I had a conversation like this with a group of DEI professionals about it. And that made me understand that it has been grief I've been dealing with. It's just coming out in different ways, in ways that I can allow it to come out without feeling completely bepuddled.
That's such a great word, bepuddled. I hear you. I
Bepuddled.
like the way you say that you're finding ways to let it come out in a way that maybe you still feel control of, or that's more acceptable to you.
Yeah, it's more acceptable to me. It's
Yeah.
what I need in the moment.
Yeah. Would you mind talking about some of those ways, or could you give some examples of how you express grief?
Um, well, a lot of times I will go to apathy, like you said, and get to where I just don't care. And then when I have enough strength, then it'll come back, and I'll stomp around. Anger will be in service to my grief, and I'll get kind of red faced, and sometimes my eyes leak, but they don't. I don't actually do the sobbing like I thought I would. Um, but it's definitely working to transform my life into something that is um, acceptable in terms of balance, so that I have more balance in my life. And I went to a lot of depression during my grief. And that's one of the things that I wanted to ask for your thoughts on. And that was, I had a hard time telling the difference between my depression, severe depression, and grief. And if whether it's like the coloring of the rainbow being not distinct colors, maybe grief and depression overlap. They're both in the sadness family. And whether there is just a fine line difference, I don't know, but I wanted to see what you all thought about that.
I think definitely I've felt something similar, and I know that a lot of people around me that I work with, and also some clients, they're not able to name it, but I think that they're grieving. But I also feel in what they're saying to me, I'm observing that there's a sadness and depression coming up. They just can't name it, because who's going to sit and go, well, yeah, I'm so depressed. Yeah, I feel depressed. I mean, in a normal conversation, that's not the first thing that comes up. They want to say everything else, right? All the other weasel words, feeling stretched, overwhelmed. Yeah, this is, anxious, uncertainty, I'm scared. Um, they're not ever going to the depression word, right? Or even sadness. And so I think that there's that nuance that again lets them dip in and out of it. And that's where I think the more we know the language and the information and the messages about emotions, that we then have that ability to regulate. But if you don't have that, if you don't have a lot of words or names for the emotions and feelings, then that's where you could struggle and sort of misname it, I guess, or sort of just brush over it.
Right.
I think it's so natural that you didn't know when you were grieving and when you were depressed, and then going back into grief and into sadness. And, you were probably just sort of swimming around in that swamp of not knowing and couldn't reach the edge to pull up for
That's
even just,
exactly what I felt.
yeah, yeah. I totally recognize that.
What this brings up for me is the first key of emotional genius, that all emotions are equal, that they all have messages for you. But especially in the United States, there are certain emotions that are okay to feel, right? It's okay for you as a woman to express happiness and sadness. But if you express sadness, then you're weak, right?
Mm.
And if you're a man, it's okay in the United States to express anger, but not sadness or fear. But happiness is okay, but as long as it's not too happy.
Mm.
Right.
So, I mean, essentially, we're all shamed for feeling the full spectrum of emotions. And then we're trying to also be pigeonholed to fit in a certain box as well. And I know that for me, crying is very much still associated, even though intellectually I understand that it's just my emotions are just giving me information. Emotionally, there's a part of me that is still really afraid to express my sadness or my grief by crying, by showing it, by expressing it, because that would equate with me being a weak person.
Mm.
And this is something I'm still struggling with, actually, something we haven't talked about yet. But one of the things that we use in DEI is shrines and altars, kind of bringing in the ceremonial to help us work through emotions, to make them conscious and also give them a place to be honored that is outside of our bodies. And so behind me, you can see I've got a little altar set up here. And it's actually, this is what I'm working on right now, is honoring all of my emotions, welcoming all of my emotions, um, not just the ones that are acceptable. And I kind of laugh to myself even now. I mean, I've been doing this work, gosh, for 6 years, and I'm still working on the very foundational aspects. And it's just a spiral that I keep going through, right? I have one kind of little breakthrough understanding. I burn a contract. I wake up a little bit more. And then I just take another turn around, and here it is again. So it's just such a process, and I'm actually kind of excited. I'm really excited to talk about grief, because I've been feeling it coming up for me, but it's felt stuck, like it's stuck in my throat, like there's something in me that can't let it out. And I really I'm wanting to create a sacred space for it, to welcome it, because it is so appropriate right now.
Mm. I wonder if for you maybe it would be really helpful to go through some grief rituals, but also grief in a communal way, because again, going back to the U.S., which is a very individualistic society. I'm living in the Middle East, and it's a lot more. It's less individualistic, and there's a lot of Asians and Asia in general, or India, China. They have a sense of commune. And even in India, grieving and the whole death and burial process has like 13 different steps to it, or 13 different rituals to it. It's something that I just heard from a colleague of mine who's from India, and we were talking about grief and what we were feeling right now, and he said, yeah, in our culture, we go through 13 steps. So I want to read more about that. And I think that may be opening up some thoughts and ideas, and also a way of letting yourself go through grieving in a different way. So you're not alone. You don't have to go through grief alone, right?
That's
You
really
can do it with friends. You can do it with family. You can do it with a group, like you're doing now with us, talking about it, but in a sense of belonging to somebody who's feeling the same, may be very, very helpful.
I love that idea. I also really love that you just said there are 13 rituals, and it's a step-by-step
I
process.
think
Like,
it's
I'm like,
steps.
oh, A
Yeah,
format. That sounds great.
yeah, I'm not sure if it's actually 13 rituals, but he said, I'm pretty sure he said rituals, but I wanna Google that and learn more. It was either 13 steps or 13 processes or 13 rituals, but I definitely remember the number 13. So I wanna, I wanna educate myself more on that. But I think the point is that you don't have to grieve alone. You can grieve as a community, right? As a village, as a family. And I think that in itself, um, it becomes much more bearable, probably for some people, not
Yeah,
to go.
I participated in the grief ritual that Carla and Amanda did in Virginia a year and a half ago. And I did experience, I was able to cry during the grief ritual and supporting everyone else in building their shrines um, and in going through the process. And like all rituals, it had a very distinct beginning, a middle phase where people are recognized for where they are, and then an ending where everybody is celebrated. And it was really moving, and it was originally designed to be about race relations and racial injustice. And it ended up being um, whatever grief people had. Some people had that racial injustice as a grief, but some people didn't. And so that's where I learned that you can't direct grief either. You can't say, okay, turn it on and turn it off. It doesn't work like that. It comes when it comes.
Mm.
And
Or
it
grieve about this, but don't grieve about that. But
right.
yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Like I grieve about things that are happening to me, but I can also see where where some people would believe, well, you can grieve about something. You can grieve about a person dying, but you can't grieve about a world event or, something different. Like there's a label to it or a
Right.
definition of what you can grieve over or not. Yeah.
That seems unfair.
It does.
My sense of envy and jealousy are coming out right now. Like, no. Oh, I think the thing that is most freeing about grief for me, and also the most scary, is the way that I can't control it. It's almost like stepping into chaos. Or another way of putting it is trusting implicitly my body to know what to do. And actually, oh, that's interesting. Maybe for me, I've in the past 15 years, 20 years, I've had a history of kind of health issues related to parasites and physical weakness, and which has led me to have to stop doing some things that I've loved, some physical activities that I've loved. And it's led me to kind of a physical distrust of my body, but also going through the process of rebuilding my trust in my body, what it's capable of, and relearning what what it's trying to tell me. So that's definitely been a big process of grieving and multiple grieving processes in my life, because I used to be
Yeah.
an athlete. I used to be a hugely physical person. And for a long time, that wasn't physically possible for me. I did not have it. And that was the only way I knew to express myself. So going back through learning to trust my body again with its new capabilities, with its new limitations, it has utterly been a relearning and a reprocess. But there's also kind of, it's almost like there's a trauma there that I have of distrust. I remember once I was climbing. I knew I was tired, but I was climbing and I actually blacked out because I was so tired. And I ended up falling and just kind of like coming back to as my feet hit the wall, as my rope caught me. And it was a turning point for me. I hadn't realized that I was sick at that point.
Wow.
And so it made me kind of wake up and say, wow, something is really wrong here. And I'm realizing right now that I still have some trust that I am withholding from myself, but perhaps I still have some grief to process around this old world and my new world, just like you were talking about, Bobby.
Yeah. Um, and something you said caught my attention is that you used your body to express yourself and probably to release emotions. And now you've had to find a whole new way to express those emotions, and something that's probably like using your body to express those things is acceptable in this society. And the other ways that you can express them, or maybe not, and that could be part of what you're grieving as well,
Oh,
or
yeah.
that you're facing.
Oh, yeah. My whole paradigm actually was in being physically strong and emotionally um, tough, whatever that means. Unemotional, maybe, is what I was striving for, because my role models were male. And I thought that's what I had to be respected in my little climbing world. And I didn't have any role models of people who skillfully worked with their emotions, who even acknowledged their emotions, aside from being happy. And that really affected my identity. It was a complete shift in identity. And actually, that has turned me to here, becoming someone who works with emotions all the time, who talks about them, who helps people learn about them. So
Yeah.
it really was a turning point.
Yeah, you teach what you need to learn, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to sit with that for a while, where you were saying that you were in a very male-dominated climbing, atmosphere. Um, I think that that's what I'm seeing in the field that I work in, where I'm coaching a lot of. It's big in IT and technology, also a lot of males, and I'm seeing a similar thing where they're really not sitting well with their emotions. And it's almost like everybody has the hero complex. Like everybody that's a leader needs to be seen as the Superman taking everybody through this crisis, right?
Right.
And if they would just accept that nobody's perfect, nobody's ever done this before, no prime minister or king or queen or whatever you are as a world leader or a country leader has gone through anything like this, of taking their people through this. And it's hard on anyone, right? Let alone the people who are in the spotlight, who are expected to be able to be strong and know the right answers. And I think I see that in the different organizations and enterprises where I'm coaching as well. That these leaders are really their expectations are set so high by themselves to be able to help others.
Well, that's a good point. Expectations.
Mm,
That's a good thing to burn contracts on.
yeah.
Or create a ritual with. Yeah.
Or create a ritual. Yeah. I'm thinking I'm going to create an altar and to my grief, and see how that goes. Um, now that we've done this conversation, I had not really considered doing that, but I think I will.
That sounds really beautiful. Like a beautiful chance to honor your grief
Yeah.
and what was. I've been sighing a lot throughout this whole conversation. Like I've just been getting these little bubbles of like emotion, intention. Sigh it out, release it out.
Yeah, I think you're letting go of some things, which is nice.
Yeah, I think that's what's really lovely about conversations about emotions. It is a chance to kind of feel around internally and see, well, you know, what have I been holding on to? What have I not been acknowledging? Or just having this conversation helping me realize, like, oh, I've still got some grief around who I was and who I am. And like I was saying at the beginning, it's just a process. But
Yeah.
it's just, you know, small amounts coming forward. And then grief I think of as like large amounts coming forward in a torrent sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you have any last words about grief before we say goodbye?
I like that you're going to do an altar. I was thinking about what I wanted to do. I'm starting a workshop for the next 6 Saturdays with a small group of 8, maybe 10 people, just about around emotions and empathy. And I know grief is going to come up for a lot of people, but these are all new. These are the people that are in the group are all new to emotions work. So I didn't want to overwhelm them with like, real heavy shrines and work like that. But I do definitely want to take them through some exercises, whether it's grounding or rejuvenation and things like that. So, yeah, I definitely think that I need to take them through something. But I want it to be lighter. And I'm not trying, it's also wrong for me to judge that they're not ready for something that may be a little bit more intense. But I'm conscious about, the fact that we only have 6 Saturdays to go through 17 emotions and a lot of practices. And I just want to focus in on certain things that they may need. So grounding, rejuvenation, boundary work, I think are the ones to start with.
Definitely.
And then I could test the waters and see if they are ready for a ritual or a shrine or something symbolic to kind of close it off. But yeah, I think that's my intent anyway.
Sounds wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a really potentially very powerful experience. Because I think the experiential is so important with learning about emotions.
Yeah,
Really a 6-week class.
Real conscientious about letting it flow how it wants to flow, but of course having some kind of framework. But I think I'm just going to ask them, what would you like to have? What would you like to happen? What do you need? Right? Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's great, really, to trust your students.
Yeah.
Will you be using your horse in this too? Will Lola be involved?
I won't, because it's going to be virtual. I guess I could do one session where I'm at the horse with my PC or something. I'm not sure how that would work, but we're going to do it on Zoom, and it's just an hour for the next 6 Saturdays. Just because I felt called to it right now. There's so much going on around us. And it's interesting because when I ask people, well, would you like something like an interactive session on how to deal with your emotions, how to be more empathic at work, and as a leader, how to be more empathic towards your employees. Yeah, definitely. I want to. And then when I sent them the brochure or my little flyer, and I said, are you ready to sign up? Everybody just went quiet. And it's like, sounded good, but I want to be part of it. I think there's still, and a friend of mine who said, oh, I'll send out my Instagram again with the invite. And she said, has anybody from my, group responded? I said, nope. And I asked her, are they all British? No judgment again. She said, yes, they are. They're British moms. I said, well, there you go, because everything there is stiff upper lip and we don't talk about it, right? So the whole culture and stereotypes and how to deal with all this definitely coming up. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, good luck with your course. I hope that these people do end up signing up, because it's going to
No,
be.
no, I've already got 8. I'm waiting for 2 more people to, they said they would let me know in the next couple of days. So I've maxed it out at 10. I said, I don't want any more. We need to have a really nice, deep conversation, and everybody needs to be able to speak, and it's only an hour long. So 8 is probably a good number, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, excellent. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to
Thank you, Anshin.
thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your insights. This has been really beautiful and bountiful.
Well, thanks for making this possible for us to share. It's nice. Do this more often.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to do this lots more. I really love talking about emotions. I think it's totally fascinating. And it gets things going, when you're well, for me, I live with my husband and my 2-year-old daughter, and she doesn't talk a whole lot about emotions, but she expresses them.
Especially at 2.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm learning all kinds of things these days.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great to talk to you guys again and to see you face to face. We don't get together, often enough because of the distances, and now even more distance. But
Yeah.
it's been great to chat with you.
Okay, well, take care. I hope that you both continue to be well, and that that Bobby, your shrine goes well and smoothly. And P, I hope.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Anshin. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.